Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And once again, it's our Conservative caucus that's taking the lead on an important issue facing Canadian economy. I want to thank my colleague from Kamloops, Thompson Caribou, and I agree with her words in regards to the development of jobs and creativity for jobs that will occur from this type of a line going ahead. And only the member from Winnipeg North would be, in his discussion of the questions that he brought forward, would really know about how to divide the country, because of, one example would be just the small business program that they tried to bring in last fall. But once again, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and his lack of leadership have let down thousands of Canadians and their families who rely on the natural resource sector for their livelihood. Our leader doesn't and hum and procrastinate when asked about his support for energy projects. He isn't afraid to take a position, even when that decision may cause some opposition. Today we're calling on the Prime Minister to do the same. He must prioritize the construction of the federally approved Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project by taking immediate action and table his plan in this House. The Prime Minister must stop putting the interests of foreign oil companies and foreign despots ahead of Canadian interests. Over the past 2 years, the Liberal government introduced new regulations on energy projects and forced Canadian oil companies to comply with standards that are not required for foreign oil companies like countries like Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Algeria that export oil to our Canadian market. Now the government is increasing regulatory uncertainties that are scaring off investments and jobs that would come with these projects. It's ridiculous, Mr. Speaker, that Canada has to import foreign oil because of our inabilities to get energy transported from Western Canada to the East Coast. We know that Canada's environmental and labour standards are the envy of the world, as pointed out by my colleague just a moment ago. We believe in a process that is fair, transparent, and incorporates the latest technology and knowledge that we can build pipelines to get our energy to market. There's no doubt that pipelines are the safest and environmentally sound way to transport oil and gas. They are no different than a road, a highway, a railway, or electrical line. They are vital infrastructure that Canadians rely on. And as Don Iveson, the Mayor of Edmonton, just said, just imagine if we're trying to build a railroad 100 years ago and mayors were saying no. What kind of a country would we have? End quote. Mr. Speaker, 4 major pipelines were constructed by our former Conservative government, right, as well as a handful of smaller ones which act as tributaries to the main lines. These Ministry of Truth facts would make even the Liberals' own die-hard partisans cringe, as this is a clear, truthful point that Liberals are embarrassed to acknowledge. It's clear the Liberals' priority is not to make Canadian jobs or decrease greenhouse gas emissions by firstly impeding the construction of the Eastern Energy Line to the Maritimes and by not moving forward with Northern Gateway. Regarding this specific Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion project, we know that the vast majority of landowners who will be impacted by this project didn't file objections, and more than half of the entire detailed route has already been approved. Public hearings are still going on, and they are working with those who have questions about the timetable, location, and methods where the pipeline will be built within the 150-metre corridor that has already been approved. The National Energy Board has ruled that Kinder Morgan must fulfill 157 conditions, and that is exactly what they plan on doing. So while there are those who are ignoring all the work that's gone into the planning stages and in the entire approval process, it is discouraging to know they are still doing everything in their power to stop the pipeline for purely political reasons. When everything was done correctly and the proper process was followed, there should be no more uncertainty from the various levels of government. It is unfathomable they are changing the rules in the middle of the process and will do anything they can to cause further delays. Now it's time for our political leaders to stop the dithering. As Conservatives, we believe that supporting the middle class is more than just a talking point. We believe in supporting policies and projects that actually help the middle class by creating jobs and prosperity. The very same projects that create jobs, which heat our homes and pay for the social services like our health care and education systems. So it's long past time that the Prime Minister removes himself from the Witness Protection Program, roll up his sleeves, and do everything in his power to immediately end this impasse. There are more times than I can count when trying to decipher what the Prime Minister is saying. We are used to the Prime Minister and the gobbledygook in this chamber, but I can assure you that his lack of clarity on this project is causing long-term harm. He's like the Michael Scott of Canadian politics. He starts a sentence and doesn't know where it's going. He just hopes he finds it along the way. And because of that vacuum of leadership and the lukewarm support his cabinet has offered, there's no wonder the NDP Green Cabal in BC saw an opening to throw a wrench into this project. They could see the indecisiveness and the hesitancy from this federal government. They saw a weakness and are using this political cleavage to cause as much chaos as they possibly can. They are hoping that creating turmoil will inevitably wear down Kinder Morgan and they'll walk away from the project. They are hoping to divide the Liberal caucus and those who are more worried about getting re-elected than doing what is right, even in the face of diversity. We only need to look at Energy East as the strategies used by those who opposed the project. We cannot let the BC NDP government and those and their cohorts submarine this project. While the expansion of Kinder Morgan Canada's Trans Mountain Pipeline was approved in 2016, the $7.4 billion project continues to run into political obstructionists who, quite frankly, will do everything in their power to derail it. No carbon tax, social license or environmental assessment will appease those who oppose the project. We must call a spade a spade. We are dealing with individuals who will never support this pipeline. Let's face it, even 157 conditions which were being met are not enough to satisfy their requirements to support the pipeline. It is increasingly worrisome that pipeline projects in this country have become a litmus test to determine if one cares about the environment. Mr. Speaker, that is a false choice. Regardless if the pipeline is approved by the NEB, abides by every condition, has the highest environmental standards, and they consult with every possible stakeholder, there is nothing that will eventually get them to say yes. And if that wasn't enough, the Liberals are now going to upend the system, dismantle the NEB, and make the process even more political. Well, I have yet to decide if their actions are in fact well-meaning. It wouldn't be too far of a stretch to think they're being naive. They're emboldening the forces who seek to stop energy projects. And today it's my sincere hope that we get unanimous support in this House on our motion. We must send a strong message that we stand united in getting this pipeline built, that we stand behind the process that approved the pipeline, and most of all, that we stand behind those who work in the industry. Is it really too much to ask for the Government of Canada to stand shoulder to shoulder with an industry that either directly or indirectly employs hundreds of thousands of Canadians? I couldn't be more proud of how our Conservative team has consistently advocated for this project. There was no ambiguity in our position. We will always stand for our energy sector. We will be a voice for those who feel let down by the inaction of this government. And it is abundantly clear that the Prime Minister has no plan whatsoever to get the Trans Mountain expansion project completed. No one in the industry actually thinks the Liberals are an ally of the oil and gas sector. As Rex Murphy so eloquently said, the Prime Minister has given, quote, a treacle of insincere bromides, verbal goo, to serve a moment's press, forgotten before the camera lights dimmed, end quote. If only Kinder Morgan could change its name to Amazon or Bombardier, we wouldn't have to face this debate. we wouldn't have to ask the Prime Minister to do his job. We wouldn't need to ask the Liberals to stand up for their constituents. Mr. Speaker, I'll close by saying that I call on the government to put away their buzzwords and naivety and table a plan for this debacle to get this resolved. We will not waver or retreat when it comes to our livelihood. We will work to put people back to work and get the energy sector rolling. We will unite Canada, reduce red tape, and support job-creating projects like Trans Mountain. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for St. Catharines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.